So with the 1.01 pick in our mixed 23 and 24 Superflex rookie mock draft, I think this is a pretty obvious pick. It's the best player from the last two draft classes, or at least was the most valuable player from the past two draft classes, is CJ Stroud, the quarterback for the Houston Texans, who just got Stephon Diggs as well, to add to Nico Collins, to add to Tank Dell, to add to Dalton Schultz, to add to Joe Mixon. Like, it's just the weapons that he has in Houston coming off of the season that he just had, which wasn't one of the best rookie quarterback seasons that we've ever seen, but it's still so much potential and so much growth that can happen for a young quarterback with that type of talent around him. That, I mean, he was vaulted to the QB1 on keep trade cut as soon as Stephon Diggs got traded, which, I mean, you can argue the merits of that valuation, but he is still a solidified top five, if not even potentially top three dynasty quarterback who could be up in the upper tiers of dynasty rankings. So he has to be the 1.01 here.
Yeah, you can't put anybody else here. I think in a year we can revisit it, and there's a real world where Caleb Williams is ranked higher. But given how hard it is to evaluate quarterbacks, it's stupid, I think, to just go away and look at what CJ Stroud did and say, you know what, I'm so confident in my evaluation of a quarterback that I know somebody is coming in is going to have a better season. It's so far from a guarantee that I think it's irresponsible to even suggest Caleb Williams over CJ Stroud right now. And I mean, the market bears that out. Nothing I'm saying is like a hot take, but I think just giving the reason we're taking him over like a generational prospect like Caleb Williams is the sure thing is almost always a better bet than just betting on pure upside. And that's what we're doing. And speaking of a generational prospect, right? Caleb Williams is going to be the 102 for me as well. And you can say, well, Anthony Richardson is sitting on the board. He flashed early. But Caleb Williams, I think, is a better quarterback right now than Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson left so early in his rookie year that I think he's far from a sure thing at this point as well. So if I have to take the elite runner versus a guy that is hopefully going to be the Bears' first 4,000-yard passer in history, I'm going to take the passer that also has the potential to run for 400 to 500 yards. Now, I don't think that is the baseline for Caleb Williams. I don't think we're going to consistently see him run that much, but the arm talent, the aura of Caleb Williams is enough for me to take him over Anthony Richardson right now at the 102.
100% agree. I would also take Caleb Williams over Anthony Richardson here in this style of a mock draft because it is just pure upside. And I mean, we really are, in a way, still comparing the two as prospects. I know we saw Anthony Richardson in NFL games, but it was enough to still bump his value up from being a raw prospect, but it wasn't enough to really solidify him as somebody who gained a lot of value like CJ Stroud and to be above Caleb Williams because, you know, it was a lot of rushing efficiency and we didn't really see the passing numbers that we were expecting Caleb numbers to be. And if you're looking at just situationally, assuming that Caleb Williams is a Bear, I would still take Caleb Williams' offense over Anthony Richardson's offense today, currently, prior to the NFL draft. I mean, the Colts could draft somebody. I feel like that might be an expectation in the top 50 overall that they draft a wide receiver. But if you're looking and comparing DJ Moore and Michael Pittman, that's basically a wash. You would take Keenan Allen over Josh Downs right now, you know, so there are just better weapons in the Bears offense still that lends me towards taking Caleb Williams as well. Situationally, not even bringing up the fact that I believe Caleb Williams is just a better talent. Now, I will say, though, Anthony Richardson is my pick at the 1.03 here. We're on quarterback, 3 in a row because I think he has to be because, like I said, like he's still kind of a prospect, but we did see enough. And in the two full games that we saw, he was a top 5 quarterback in those 2 weeks because of the rushing upside. I mean, he is going to be a guy that has the potential to rush for 1,000 yards any given season. And really the passing numbers are just the icing on the cake. It's nothing different than what we were talking about this time last year on the Indianapolis Colts. And maybe they do draft somebody. Maybe they draft Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe they draft Xavier Worthy. Maybe they draft Adonai Mitchell, you know, Troy Franklin in the second round. They still have the ability to add more weapons around him to then increase his situation as well from a passing standpoint. That then just, you know, like I said, icing on the cake to what he has rushing wise.
He may go down as one of the best running quarterbacks of all time, like just from a pure rushing ability. There's enough questions around Anthony Richardson that we don't even know if he's a starter at the end of his first rookie contract. Like there's no way that is even close to a guarantee. And like this again, the same thing as an argument for Caleb Williams, but the passing is usually stickier than the running ability is for these guys long terms. Like that's always what I'm going to come down to as a differentiator when you're talking of this level or of this level of quality of prospect. Now, getting off of the quarterback train here, I'm going to go ahead and take our first wide receiver at the 104, and I'm taking Marvin Harrison Jr. I think there's a few other names that could be in the conversation here, but look, there has been too much talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. being arguably the best wide receiver prospect people have ever seen. Like that is a real conversation being had. I understand what Puka did. I understand how good Malik Nabers is going to be. But when you have a chance to take somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr., you simply have to do it. Like in Dynasty, he's in the conversation to go over Caleb Williams as the 101, in certain leagues. So I don't think it's crazy to have him here as the clear-cut wide receiver one across both these classes.
I went back and forth on should Marvin Harrison be the wide receiver one in this format of a mock compared to Puka, but I think I agree with you with Marvin Harrison because this is kind of in a way a mix between Stroud versus Caleb versus Anthony Richardson, if that kind of makes sense. Like it's a mixture of all of that. Do you want the complete generational talent and full upside that possesses, or do you want the known in Puka who just had a top 5 fantasy season as a rookie with 100 receptions, almost 1,500 yards, all that kind of stuff. And I think I still lean towards Marvin Harrison here because of the talent that he has. And also, it seems like he is guaranteed to land in either Arizona or LA. If one of them trades back, it seems like the other one's going to end up taking him. And if that's the case, then that's pairing him with Justin Herbert or Kyler Murray for the next decade. That is a better situation, I think, than the what ifs beyond Matthew Stafford in the Rams offense as well. Not that I really want to get into that with Puka because I don't really necessarily think that matters, but that's a notch in, Marvin Harrison's profile that I think is putting him up here at the 1.04 for me as well too. So I agree with you. Marvin Harrison is the wide receiver one still in this format. Now I will say Puka Nacua is the 1.05. He is my next pick here in this mock draft as the wide receiver too, because of the known factor for Puka here. Like I just said, 100 receptions, almost 1,500 yards, the best rookie wide receiver season that we have ever seen in the NFL. That's what separates him above Malik Nabers and other quarterbacks in last year's class or this year's class, running backs that we haven't even touched on either. It is just I'm almost always going to take a top 10 dynasty wide receiver over a top 10 dynasty running back, especially when that wide receiver has more of a bid to be top 5 than he is, back of the top 10 as well. I mean, I have no issues whatsoever about Puka himself and his talent. I don't have any issues about the offense or Matthew Stafford, even though I alluded to that a little earlier. Like it's still, he's probably going to end up being quarterback proof, just like kind of Anquan Bolden was, just like Justin Jefferson is. It's Puka Nacua. I am trusting in Puka, and that's why he's my wide receiver 2 here.
He's 22 years old right now. Year one, put up again, like we've talked about this, one of the best seasons of all time from a rookie. Like it was exceptional at every single level. Everything he does translated and is going to stick. Like none of it felt gimmicky. None of it felt like it was a flash in the pan. It was just consistent domination from basically the moment he stepped on the field until the end of the season. So there's no reason to think Puka Nacua does not come back and put up another top 10 season in year 2. And then let's just round it out here. The third wide receiver we've mentioned in this group. So at the 106, I'm taking Malik Nabers over Bijan, over Jahmyr Gibbs, over the next couple of names on our list here. And look, he's going to get top 10 guaranteed draft capital. I think that's like the absolute floor, barring something insane. Realistically, it's probably top 5. So you have that level of investment from a team. And then if you looked at his perception, 84th percentile versus man, 78th versus press. The dude is as good a route runner as there is coming out of college. He is going to be an absolute problem at every single level and honestly deserves to be in this conversation. I think there's a real world. He is a top 10 wide receiver for a lot of people in Dynasty, the second he gets drafted.
Do you think that there's a possibility that your value of him to fall outside of the top 10 is possible if he lands in, we'll say, less than ideal situation. Like, I don't know if you necessarily want to say that the Giants are less than ideal because he would immediately be the wide receiver one. But that seems like a pretty popular landing spot for him. I don't know how you feel about him as the wide receiver 2A, 2B in Chicago. I've seen him being mocked there. There are some other teams kind of in that back half of the top 10 or teams that could trade into that top 10 if Nabers starts to slide as quarterbacks or other offensive linemen or defensive players get prioritized. That maybe Nabers has a more than decent chance of being in a less than ideal situation. Does that bother you at all?
It really doesn't. And you and I both talk about this all the time. Talent over situation. Like if Malik Nabers is that guy, he will rise. He will rise up and basically assert himself. I think that's the expectation. Chicago may be the one place where that's a little bit more difficult because you are alongside two freakishly talented wide receivers in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. But ultimately, I mean, he's gonna make noise. He is going to make his mark on a season. I don't really care where he lands. I obviously have preferences. Like, yes, I prefer he's with Justin Herbert. I prefer he's with Kyler Murray. But if it's Daniel Jones for a season and then they take, Shadur Sanders or whoever, and they're inevitably picking 101 next year, I'm fine with that too. Things shape themselves out. Situations change. Malik Nabers is going to be really damn good, basically no matter what.
So now with the 1.07, let's move away from quarterbacks. Let's move away from wide receivers. We need to talk about some of these running backs and who else to start but with Bijan Robinson, last year's RB1, last year's 1.01 for basically a lot of people in any format. But Bijan Robinson, I think to me, is still the dynasty RB1. His situation absolutely improved with Kirk Cousins coming over, Arthur Smith being fired. And I mean, even if that situation didn't improve at all in terms of getting a better quarterback, and even if he was still in the same offense, Bijan Robinson was the RB7 overall in fantasy last year. And what I think we can all agree on was like the worst system and offense possible for a player like Bijan Robinson. But I mean, he still had 300 total opportunities. He had 86 targets of those 300 opportunities, had, over 1,300 total yards, 8 total touchdowns. That just seems like the floor moving forward for Bijan Robinson because the talent is there. He's so freaking good that if we can just look at year one, like if we fast forward 5 years and we look at his rookie year and be like, that was the worst year that he had in his first 5 years, I would not at all be surprised. And everybody's going to profit from the fact of being able to either trade for Bijan or held on to Bijan after drafting him last year. He is just so good that it's a testament to how good everybody else is above him, to the fact that he is 7th overall in this mock draft.
The expectation with Bijan every single year for the next probably 3 to 4 years is top 5. Like top 5 finish. Anything worse is a disappointment. And like you said, like that just speaks to our opinion of Bijan, the NFL's opinion of Bijan. Like he is as good as advertised, and a scheme change is going to be great because Arthur Smith was an idiot. And you bring in Kirk Cousins because Desmond Ridder was terrible. So everything has gotten better, at least on paper. Now, obviously, he has to go out and stay healthy. That's the biggest concern. That's the reason he's at 7 and not, somewhere in the top 6, is just running back inherently has more injury risk. It's just the way the world works. So Bijan, I can't really, benefit, or I can't advocate for taking him higher here. But at the 107, like he has to be the first running back off the board without question. So going back to quarterback, actually, at the 108, I'm going to take Jayden Daniels. And this, to me, is the riskiest pick in this first round. Because Jayden Daniels, the chances of him being a bust in the NFL are a lot higher than I think a lot of people would like. But what you get with Jayden Daniels, while he is a starter for however long that is a player that has top 5 upside. He is Anthony Richardson with a better arm. Like that's the truth. Jayden Daniels could come out and run for 800 to 1,000 yards, throw for 3,700 yards, and I wouldn't really be all that surprised. The rushing upside is spectacular. The deep ball is, it's pristine. What's ultimately going to end up sinking him or making or breaking for Jayden Daniels is his ability to not take 1,000 sacks, which is a giant problem in college. And can his frame hold up? Because he is reckless when he runs. So those are that's the good, that's the bad. But at this pick, there's a lot of talent still left on the board. Jayden Daniels, if he hits his ceiling output, he has the potential to be like the QB1 in Dynasty. That is a real path, even with Mahomes and Allen out there right now. That is a real conversation we could be having in 3 to 4 years if everything breaks his way.
I think this is a good place that you can kind of stomach the risk when you're doing a mock in this sort of a format, is because I think he has, of the top 3, maybe even top 4 if you include McCarthy, Daniels might have the lowest probability of receiving a second contract, like a substantial second contract, but also has an insane ability to, like you said, be the QB1 overall in fantasy, in Dynasty, because of the skill set and type of player that he is. So I think here at the 1.08, I'm very comfortable with it here. And I think for me, as the 1 point, I would take him over Malik Nabers. I think he has that ability to be over Nabers. I think you can argue him over Bijan Robinson as well too, just given the running back quarterback dynamic. Those two players feel safer, especially Bijan, in terms of like hitting upside and maintaining value moving forward. But that just, I think, shows the upside that Daniels has himself in this type. Like if we were to do this next year, he could be a top 5 pick. So with the 1.09, then I am taking Jahmyr Gibbs, going running back with my last pick, going running back again here, just because, I mean, it's Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't know if there's really much of an argument that I need to make here either. There's just so much talent. But Gibbs, to me, I mean, Bijan finished as the RB7 last year. Jahmyr Gibbs finished as the RB8, and that's in total fantasy points. And Gibbs did that in 2 fewer games than Bijan. He actually averaged almost 2 points per game more than Bijan Robinson last year. He did the work with David Montgomery. Without David Montgomery, he was, he showed the ability to be a workhorse running back. He showed the ability to be a PPR monster as well too. Jahmyr Gibbs is probably a lot of people's RB2 in Dynasty behind Bijan Robinson. He's in that top tier of 3. I would include Breece Hall in that tier as well. But I mean, when you get to this point, like I'm sure people probably wanted to see Jahmyr Gibbs higher, but again, it's the running back position. It's just the nature of how it is in Dynasty. But the fact that you can get a top 5 fantasy running back here at the 109, again, it's crazy how much talent there is that you can get a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs down here, because he is also just so freaking good.
Yeah, I mean, his rookie season comes with a 14% target share, an 8% breakaway run rate, which is second in the NFL. So you're basically telling me I can get a guy that's going to catch almost 100 passes, and then, oh, by the way, he's also just going to be disgustingly explosive every time he touches the ball. Yeah, I'm in. Sign me up. That's the easiest choice of all time. Again, the reason he's not ahead of Bijan is I think I obviously prefer Bijan with the workload. I want more touches over fewer. I don't think that's a crazy take. And then Jayden Daniels, because I think hitting on a quarterback matters so much more than hitting on a running back. So, again, we talked about the ceiling. We don't need to get back into it. Jahmyr Gibbs is as good as they come. He's my RB3 behind Breece. And there's not really much else to say there, I think. Getting back to the rookie class at hand, though, in 2024 at the 110, I'm going Rome Odunze. And I've recently flipped on him and Drake Maye. In my actual rookie class, on my actual rookie mock drafts, all of it, Rome Odunze has just shown enough that I think he deserves to be this pick. He does feel so absurdly safe. And he's probably the wide receiver 1 in a lot of other classes. Unfortunately, he's just running into a buzzsaw of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. I mean, when you look at his ability as a route runner, it beats out both Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Nabers. Versus man, he's 87th percentile. Versus zone, he is 81st percentile. Versus press, 92nd. He's going to step on the field and be one of the best route runners in the NFL from day one. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. He brings everything to the table you want in a true number 1 wide receiver. Unfortunately, he's just, I don't think, as explosive as Nabers and Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's what's keeping him down on this board just a little bit. But make no mistake, wide receiver 3 in this class is not a knock. He is going to have an exceptional career.
I'm also coming around to this idea that Odunze deserves to be more of a top 5 pick in superflex leagues this year, because of I just don't think that there is that big of a drop off from Harrison and Malik Nabers, who for a lot of people seemed like to be in like their own tier as like wide receiver one, wide receiver two. Then Odunze is like in his own tier, and then there's everybody else. But I don't know if there is really that much of a difference. Does Odunze need to belong in the same tier as Marvin Harrison and Malik Nabers? I still don't think we're at that point, but he is so much closer to those two than he is everybody else in terms of wide receivers in this class. And I think that the discount that we're going to see on him in rookie drafts this year, the discount that we're seeing here, I mean, there is a 4-pick difference between Nabers and Odunze. Now, some of that is comparing the 2023 class in here as well too, but I just think that Odunze has, if you told me 10 years from now that Odunze was the best wide receiver from this class, I would not really be all that shocked. And if you told me that all three of them were all just perennial top 5 guys, and we're talking about them as like the wide receiver 2, 3, and 5 in Dynasty, starting from 2025 and on, would not bat an eye at that either. And I think it's becoming a value to be able to get Rome Odunze this late in this mock, and at the 106, 107 in regular 24 superflex mocks. So with the 111 here, let's go back to the quarterback position, because I think that there's been a name on the board for a lot of people that has seemed to be dismissed maybe, but I think it makes sense when you look at the total draft and all the talent that we've already talked about. But we're going to talk about Drake Maye here as the QB 5 in this mock draft, and the QB 3 overall in 2024. Drake Maye, I think, is still a very solid pick. I don't know if I would necessarily call him safe. I think he's safer than Jayden Daniels from an NFL standpoint. The fantasy football aspect, I think, is what's dragging Drake Maye down here, is the fact that he's not as explosive as Jayden Daniels, even though he is a very, very good runner. Like, he is a true dual threat that I don't think he gets enough credit for, but he's still not Jayden Daniels, and his situation might not be super ideal. Now, if he lands in Minnesota, I am more than comfortable bumping him up probably about 3, 4, 5 picks in this mock draft, because that situation is just going to be so good with him and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Hawkinson coming back. But if he's in New England, that just really deflates a lot of the confidence that we have about Drake Maye, at least initially. Like, not to say that he can't become something, but initially that would be so rough. But we're talking about a very young quarterback, one of the best quarterback prospects over the past few draft classes. I think he just deserves to be here at the 111.
I still think he should be the pick for Washington. I would love that. Obviously, betting odds stay completely different. And like, there's the rumors out there that he's not ready to start day one and all these other things. And, he took a huge step back in year 3. That tends to happen when you lose a guy like Josh Downs, or, you lose all the players that helped kind of set you up for success. So to me, it's just, his profile is very, very difficult to get a read on. And the fact that he's not going to be a 800-yard rusher also drags him down from a fantasy perspective. So there's a lot going on with Drake Maye that it's very tough to have a strong lean one way or the other. So I feel like I've just started to opt for, let's take him at the end of this tier, and I'll live with the consequences, whatever they may be. And to close out the first round at the 112, I'm taking Sam LaPorta. And this pick right here, I think, was the first time I felt kind of conflicted with who I wanted to take, because there's probably 5 or 6 names that deserve to be in this spot or could be in this spot. But I mean, you can do a lot worse than taking the consensus Dynasty tight end 1, coming off of an unbelievable rookie year where he cemented himself as, the 2A, the 2B in an ascending offense that is just continuing to dominate. Like, the Lions are not going anywhere, right? They may not win anything with Jared Goff, but that offense is going to be extremely relevant as long as that offensive line holds up. Sam LaPorta is the unquestioned tight end 1 in Dynasty right now. And again, at the 112, I think, again, that just speaks to how absurd the talent is in both of these classes over the last 2 years.
He would have been my pick here at 112 had I been making this pick as well in the same situation as you, just because with these like onesie positions, it is still important to have the best of the best for those, right? And have, maybe it's not as much of a difference as what it was like when Travis Kelce was dominating just a couple years ago, or Gronk and Jimmy Graham. Like there's not as much disparity between the top tight end and everybody else because we have a very good group of tight ends currently in the NFL. Then we have the addition of Brock Bowers coming in as well too. So maybe the importance of having the best tight end isn't as important, but it's still very important. And that to me is what's differentiating between Sam LaPorta here and a bunch of other names that you could also probably take in this pick that you were saying that you were debating between. Just give me the tight end one overall, and you can deal with the value later on down the road, or just really be in love with the production that he gives you as well, because he can be a difference making tight end over at least 6 or 7 league mates, but potentially even upwards of 9 or 10.
Yeah, and if you want a really hot take here, honestly, if we were expanding this out to 2022, I'd be taking Trey McBride. I prefer Trey McBride. I prefer the situation. I prefer how he gets his points through volume typically. So again, like Sam LaPorta is fantastic, but I'll drop a nugget in there. I'd rather have Trey McBride, and you can get him for a discount. Go trade Sam LaPorta for Trey McBride in a second. And I think that's a winning move, even though we love Sam LaPorta still.
So kicking off the second round with the 2.01, I'm going to go back to the running back position, back to the 2023 class as well. And we're going to talk about Achane here, who is basically lightning in a bottle that defenses are just hoping to not let loose, because he is insane. And the fact that he is a de facto top 10 dynasty running back when he had 100 total carries last year, 103 total carries last year, is insane. But I mean, he had the same number of total touchdowns as Jahmyr Gibbs. He had almost 1,000 total yards as well too, on under 130 total touches. He is absolutely crazy with how good he is. And he landed in the perfect landing spot as well too for a player like him. I just don't feel comfortable with him in terms of the low volume that he will get, because he will not be a workhorse in the Dolphins offense. And that's probably a good thing for him. And hopefully that keeps him on the field longer and not have to miss stints of games. But I don't know. Something's weird and off about Achane for me that I just can't get on board with that. Are you the same way?
Every time he touches the ball, he has a 1 in 10 chance of going for 20 plus yards. The dude was otherworldly. Expecting that efficiency to stick year in and year out is a dangerous bet to make. We're still taking him here. We're obviously still high on him, but we're just trying to temper some expectations, because relying on crazy efficiency with low-ish volume, I think he'll see an uptick, but I don't think he ever gets like a true workhorse level. Like sticking at that is very difficult to, be productive year after year. So that's the only concern. We're going away from running back here, going back to tight end. We are going to take Brock Bowers at the 202. Like Brock Bowers has a real shot to usurp Sam LaPorta as the dynasty tight end one by the end of his rookie year, because Brock Bowers is much more than a tight end. He's a receiver. Like, let's call it what it is. He is not a traditional tight end in any capacity. He's not putting his hand in the dirt all that much. He's not going to be in line. He is going to be split out the vast majority of the time. Again, with a tight end that put up over 900 yards as a sophomore, averaged over 70 yards a game in his final season in college. Like, it has been obvious what he was going to be in the NFL from the moment he stepped on a field as a freshman. So we now get him in the NFL, a chance to have top 10 draft capital, which, if you look at history, has truly, honestly not been that kind to tight ends. Kyle Pitts, unfortunately. I'm still going to bet on Brock Bowers, because you just don't see a player like this all that often come around. I think we're doing a good job of keeping expectations down by not taking him over Sam LaPorta. I think we're at least, being smart, not getting fully swept up in rookie hype. But I mean, once week 1 starts, I'm not liable for anything I say when it comes to Brock Bowers hype.
I'm really hoping that he lands in a couple of select landing spots, whether that's the Chargers if they decide to trade back, if it's the Jets as the number 2 option. He would be the number 2 over Mike Williams in that offense with Aaron Rodgers throwing in the ball. That would be great. Even the Colts would be interesting, I think, as well too. The Bengals would also be kind of interesting. They're not as interesting, I think, as the other teams that I mentioned at the beginning, but Bowers is still situation proof. It's just, can he land in a situation where he's optimized, for like the most complete production output? Because then that will be what then ultimately determines if he vaults to tight end 1 overall in Dynasty, or if he stays kind of where he is like the 2, 3, 4. If we still want LaPorta or McBride or Hawkinson when he comes back from injury and stuff too, and we kind of have to be a little bit more patient with Bowers, kind of like what we had to do with Pitts. It's just, does that landing spot is that landing spot conducive to Brock Bowers breaking out to his potential?
The other spot I've seen floated that I don't think would be the end of the world. What about the New Orleans Saints? Like, I'm not a huge Derek Carr guy, but he's the clear cut two in that offense. Like you do step into a role where the volume is 100% going to be there, because given the landscape now, it's always been right. If you want to even be semi-relevant, you have to be the second option. Now, if you want to have a shot to really be a difference maker in fantasy, you have to be the second option. Like the landscape for tight end in Dynasty has gotten so busy that if you come in as the 3, even if you're crazy talented, there's enough guys ahead of you that have these good situations that also have the talent that could push you further down. So you land somewhere like the Bengals, at least in 2024, with T. Higgins still there. I'm a little bit more concerned for the immediate production, although long term, assuming Higgins leaves, things would probably shake out and be just fine.
So with the 2.03 here, I might hit you guys with kind of a hot take, or at least a hot player right now in terms of what has been happening recently in the news cycle. But I am still taking Rashee Rice here at the 2.03, just because I think that he is still the best wide receiver on the board right now for Dynasty, because what Rashee Rice did on the field to end the season last year was nothing short of amazing. And honestly, it was pretty reminiscent of what Amon-Ra St. Brown did to end his rookie season in Detroit. There's actually a lot of comparables between the two's rookie seasons in terms of, what they did in the first 10 or 11 weeks and then what they did to end the year. Both had an insane target share to end the year, a lot of receptions, a lot of yards, relatively low ADOT as well too. And then we have the question marks about does competition then enter into the mix and kind of ruin some of the target share that he had? Didn't necessarily matter for Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I don't think it would matter for Rashee Rice as well too. My current opinion, not to get into the legality of everything, and I'm of course no law expert, but of my opinion is that he's going to get heavily fined. He's going to get suspended. He's going to miss a quarter of the year in 2024, and then he's going to be completely fine. And it kind of reminds me of Zeke getting suspended, like his second year or something like that for 6 games or something. And it interrupted a season, but in no way did it affect his complete dynasty outlook or change the type of player and the talent that he is. And that to me is how I am approaching this with Rashee Rice, and why I'm still willing to take him here at the 2.3 over a bunch of other very good wide receivers still.
Even if he's suspended for an entire season, which I think would be a huge departure from everything else we've seen and heard from people that are smarter than us. Like, I'm not going to go into any of the legality of any of it, but we do have like precedent from the NFL in terms of these situations. It's different from the Henry Ruggs thing because nobody was injured or nobody was killed, thank God. But I mean, I think it was Jordan Addison last year had the same thing. Did he not? Like,
he had a major speeding ticket as well too. It was hardcore.
Exactly. Several guys have done this, and when there's no major tragedy that is attached to it, they're either going to get suspended a few games or not at all. I'll be shocked if he's not suspended. But Dynasty is a multi-year game. I don't care about a tiny blip on the radar. It really doesn't change anything for me. If anything, it opens up a buy opportunity, because I think if that's not there, there's a world where we're considered taking him maybe at the 112 in this draft. Like, he deserves to be in that conversation. So I'm not concerned about Rice from that perspective. I am concerned if he does something else stupid, but I mean, there's no way for us to really know that. To close out the rest of the second round, guys, we're just going to rapid fire through these picks. So with the 204, I'm taking Tank Dell. He put up over 16 points per game when he was fully healthy, even with Diggs and Nico Collins there this year. Long term, he's fine. Those guys are both free agents after the season. Tank Dell could be the Texans wide receiver 1 heading into 2025.
Then at the 2.05 here, I'm taking the primary beneficiary, I think, of the Stephon Diggs trade. I'm taking Dalton Kincaid as I think a solid argument for him to lead the Bills in terms of total targets in 2024, or at least be, that second option that we were talking about earlier, where elite tight ends need to be the second option. That I think Kincaid falls into that. So I'm taking him here at the 205.
At the 206, I'm going with Zay Flowers. He puts up a 24% target share as a rookie, which is already just a ridiculous number. The only knock and the only reason he's not higher is he is tied to Lamar Jackson. And this Ravens offense has not produced a wide receiver one in a very long time. Realistically, Zay Flowers may always just end up being a much better real life wide receiver than fantasy, but the skill is obvious. It's just a matter of the situation falling into place.
Then at the 2.07 here, another second year wide receiver, I am going to take Jordan Addison because we Addisons have to stick together. But I liked what he did as a rookie with Justin Jefferson, without Justin Jefferson. I am still concerned about the quarterback situation. I do believe that they draft somebody, whether that's JJ McCarthy, it's Drake Maye, whoever it ends up being. But that quarterback should still be better than anybody that they had post Kirk Cousins last year. And with TJ Hawkinson most likely missing at least half, if not even more, of 2024, Addison should be pretty locked in for the wide receiver 2 and the second target overall on the team, that I think that he could still do better than the quarterback situation without TJ Hawkinson there.
So at the 208, I'm going Brian Thomas, my wide receiver 4 in the 2024 rookie class. Brian Thomas obviously has some red flags. There's a reason he has fallen to this point in the draft. The guys ahead of him, we've seen them produce. There are going to be questions with Brian Thomas, but coming off of his last season in college, look, the talent is obvious. The route running is solid. The explosiveness, the size, all of it is exactly what you want. And he should be a top 15, top 20 pick in the first round. That's going to be enough to lock him in as my wide receiver 4 this year.
So with the 2.09, let me go back to the quarterback position here. And I'm actually going to take Will Levis. This one might be a little bit of a hot take for you guys over some other names in 2024, over some names in 2023 as well too. But Will Levis to me still has the upside and the ceiling to be a potential fantasy QB1 in terms of the passing upside that he has, the rushing upside that he didn't really display last year, but is still there from his tape from Kentucky. And I mean, out of all the quarterbacks that got major upgrades this year, I mean, he got Calvin Ridley, he got Tony Pollard, he got a new offensive system coming from the Cincinnati Bengals. So, I mean, there is a lot of good things for Will Levis that I am willing to take the shot on him this late in this type of a format, that I think that he is a good, better than dart throw type of player here at the quarterback position, that if he hits, like we talked about, if you hit at the quarterback position, that is more important than the other positions in a super flex league.
The Mayo man, Mr. Banana Peel himself. I got to find. At the 210, I'm going actually quarterback as well. I'm going JJ McCarthy. Now, I think there's plenty of questions about what JJ McCarthy was in college and what he's going to be in the NFL. That Michigan offense, I don't think does a good job to showcase what quarterbacks can truly do. And the one thing JJ McCarthy will have going for him, right? He's a favorite to land in Minnesota. If that's where he goes and he steps into a situation with Justin Jefferson, with Jordan Addison, with TJ Hawkinson at some point next year, and Aaron Jones in the backfield, he's going to be set up probably as well as most quarterbacks ever will be coming into the NFL.
So at the 211 here, let's go back to the running back position. Let's dip into this 2024 running back pool. And we're going to talk about my RB1, Jonathan Brooks here. I think that had he not gotten hurt, we would be talking about Brooks as not only the solidified RB1 in this class, but a potential first round NFL draft pick in the 2024 draft, which would have vaulted, I think, his value up significantly in this actual mock draft that we're doing here over some guys from 2023 as well. Jonathan Brooks, I think, is absolutely amazing. I've already penciled him in to be a Dallas Cowboy, which is just going to be amazing for his value, for his production. I mean, once he gets fully healthy in 2025, I don't really see a world where he is not a top 10 dynasty running back by this time next year, if not even earlier. So I love Jonathan Brooks in this class, and I love getting him here at the 211.
And to close it out at the 212, I'm going with JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Look, the rookie year was not what we wanted. I think that's fair to say. He starts the year injured, and I think that dramatically hampered what he was able to do this season. If you look at him after the first 4 weeks of the season, it paints a very different picture. The target share, right around 17%, which is exactly what you want. Very similar to Jordan Addison as well. But he dealt with DK Metcalf. and Tyler Lockett, where Jordan Addison really only dealt with TJ Hawkinson for most of the season. So I think given that kind of context, I think JSN really has an argument to be ranked even higher on this list. But again, I'm not leaving the second round without Jackson Smith and Jigba.